I read the Mahabharata, so you don't have to. Namaste. This is your host, Nivi, and today we're talking about Shakuntala. You've watched or heard about the Malayalam movie The Great Indian Kitchen or its Hindi adaptation Misses. You know it's making a lot of noise. For the unfamiliar, these movies are about the life of women bogged down by the weight of societal expectations. And it has been interesting to see how the topic of this movie has played out on social media. There are highly contrasting opinions. Many are saying, you know what, hey, I know what this story is saying, I can relate. And others feel like it is an attack on Indian culture and our ideals of traditional marriage and family. Some are saying a movie or story should not be questioning the way our society works, that it is modern day feminist propaganda. But is it really? Is it so bad to talk about what we know some women face? And when you think about it, using a story to highlight important social issues is actually not a new thing. You can see that in ancient Indian literature as well, which brings me to today's story, the story of Shakuntala. And no, this is not Kalidasa's Shakuntala. In this story, there is no Priyamvada, no promise ring, no temporary amnesia, or ring in a fish. No, these are part of the plot line from Abhijnana Shakuntalam, which is a beautiful Samskrita play written by the amazing writer Kalidasa. Some of the English translation of Abhijnana Shakuntalam is actually now on public domain, so you can access and read it for free online. There are also books. I have this one by Arthur Ryder. This book has a translation of Abhijnana Shakuntalam along with some of Kalidasa's other plays. It's a really good book. I recommend. So Abhijnana Shakuntalam is a love story, and it is based on the story of Shakuntala and King Dushyanta from the Mahabharata. Mahabharata's story about Shakuntala, however, is much more than just a love story. Mahabharata Shakuntala is young, beautiful, and charming, but she's also strong, independent, and is not afraid to stand up for her rights and that of her sons. Not only that, she stands up to the man she loved, Dushyanta. Dushyanta is a powerful king. He is the ancestor of the Pandavas and Kauravas. Shakuntala is no one to sneeze at either. She is the adopted daughter of a sage named Kanva. Her mother was the Apsara Menaka, and Apsaras were nobility. And her biological father was the legendary sage Vishwamitra, who was born a Kshatriya. He was a king before he left it all to be a sage. Menaka and Vishwamitra had a short relationship, and when it ended, Vishwamitra refused to accept the baby. Due to circumstances, Menaka abandoned the baby on the banks of the river Malini, which is where Sage Kanva found her. Sage Kanva ran a beautiful ashrama or hermitage on the banks of the river Malini. One day, while on a walk, he saw a flock of vultures standing guard over a lump of something. And on closer inspection, he realized that the something that they were guarding was actually a baby girl. He brought her home and raised her as his own daughter. He named her Shakuntala after the vultures or Shakunas that protected her from the wild elements. Shakuntala grew up in his ashrama, and years later, the ashrama is where she first met her husband Dushyanta. Dushyanta visited Sage Kanva's hermitage by accident. It was meant to be. He was out on an extended hunting trip with his men when one of his advisors mentioned that they were near Sage Kanva's hermitage. Dushyanta decided to visit Kanva and pay his respects. It's the polite thing to do. But when he went there, Kanva was out on business and he met the beautiful Shakuntala instead, as it was her duty to receive her father's guests. Dushyanta was immediately attracted to Shakuntala. Not only was she beautiful, but she was also charming, graceful, intelligent, and articulate. When he finds out from her that her biological father was actually sage Vishwamitra, Dushyanta asks her to marry him. He suggests a Gandharva marriage, as he was a Kshatriya or belonging to the warrior class, and she was a daughter of Kshatriya. And so this marriage was allowed between them. And yes, it was the Vedic ages and they had rules about this kind of thing. Gandharva marriage is a type of marriage when two consenting people decide to enter a marriage on their own without express permission or the presence of family members. Shakuntala isn't exactly against the marriage, but at first she tells Dushyanta that maybe they should wait for her father to come back so they can marry with his blessings. But Dushyanta did not want to wait. And when you read the epic, you sort of get the feeling that maybe people in the Vedic ages were the romantic type, because the general belief seemed to be that Gandharva marriage was the best type of marriage because it was based on love. And Dushyanta believed the same. He wanted Shakuntala to choose him. He wanted the decision to be hers. It wasn't that Shakuntala was indifferent to him. She wanted to marry Dushyanta, but she was also aware that without an elder to look out for her, she should make sure to protect her interests. So she tells Dushyanta, okay, I will marry you, but you promise me that the son born to us will be made your successor. Dushyanta agrees, and they quickly marry following the Gandharva rituals. Unfortunately, the young lovers were soon to be separated because Dushyanta had to return to Hastinapura, his capital city. I will take you to Hastinapura later with all the pomp and splendor you deserve, he promised before leaving. Shortly after Dushyanta's departure, Kanva returned to the hermitage. Shakuntala couldn't help but feel guilty for taking such a huge step without his permission. But Kanva was cool with it. He was happy for her. He told her there was no need to feel guilty, as there was nothing wrong with two consenting people entering a marriage. Moreover, Dushyanta was an eligible man. So Kanva told her, I accept and bless this marriage. Shakuntala was relieved. Everything was okay. And now she just had to wait for Dushyanta to come and get her, which he did not come back for her. More than 6 years had passed with no word from Dushyanta. Meanwhile, Shakuntala had given birth to their son, who was named Sarvadhamana, or the one who subjugated all. Sarvadhamana was a big boy, as in he was bigger than boys his age. He was strong and afraid of nothing. He tamed wild animals and he played with them. He was kind of famous for that. His energy was hard to ignore. And watching his grandson grow up so quickly, Kanva decided that Sarvadhamana needed to be with his father. It is time. Go to Dushyanta, he told Shakuntala. Accompanied by some of Kanva's trusted disciples, Shakuntala and Sarvadhamana went to the capital city of Hastinapura, where Shakuntala quickly got an audience with the king. She went to court and presented Sarvadhamana to Dushyanta. She said, this is our son. Please accept him and instate him as your heir like you promised me. And there, in front of all the members of the court, Dushyanta asked her, what promise? What son? I don't know who you are and I have no son by you. I want nothing to do with you, he says. Shakuntala was shocked, hurt and angry. But she collected her thoughts and spoke to Dushyanta calmly but firmly. Are you uttering these falsehoods because you think no one will know? Because you know the god, the stars, and the elements we are surrounded by will all know. I am your wife and partner, and I deserve to be treated with respect and kindness, she says. She also calls him out for refusing to acknowledge their son. How can you abandon a child who is your own? She asked. Even ants carry their eggs and do not break them, she told him. What Shakuntala says next makes you feel really bad for her. She laments that she must have committed a great sin in her past life because everyone abandons her. First it was her father, then her mother, and now even her husband. I will accept all of that, she says. But do not abandon my son, she pleads with Dushyanta. Dushyanta was having none of it. He accused her of lying. He questioned her claims. He said, how can your son be the age you claim him to be? Look at him. Look how big and strong he is. You're lying, he says. He also accuses her of being an opportunist. He insults her for being poor, questions her parentage, and calls her mother a courtesan. He was really harsh. But our brave Shakuntala was no pushover. She calls Dushyanta small-minded and likens him to a fool who prefers to find faults and evil in others than identify the good in them. She tells him, "If you want to judge me by my birth, know that my mother is an apsara, which makes her nobler than you. She is one of 30 gods and she can travel the sky, and so can I." But by then, Shakuntala had decided that she had had enough of Dushyanta's lies. She tells him, "I cannot abide liars. I am leaving. But remember, when you are gone, my son will be king." With that, she grabbed Sarvadamana's hand and turned to leave. Just then, an Akashavani, or celestial voice, boomed up from the sky. The voice announced, "Shakuntala tells the truth." Every member in the court was now listening to the voice with rapt attention as it told Dushyanta to do the right thing and accept Shakuntala and her son. The voice further declared, "Your son will be called Bharata because you will maintain him because of what happened today." Everyone in the court was stunned. This announcement was shocking to say the least, but even more surprising was the fact that Dushyanta seemed extremely pleased with the announcement. "You heard the messenger of the gods? This woman is my wife and this boy is my son," he declared. Later, Dushyanta explained that he pretended not to know them because he needed everyone to not doubt his words and accept Shakuntala and his son without reservations. And now that the messenger of the gods himself had spoken, there would be no doubts about their legitimacy. And thus, Shakuntala and Dushyanta were reunited, and as promised, Bharata ruled the kingdom after Dushyanta. The story actually goes in much more detail about the husband-wife partnership and how a wife should be respected and cherished. It also talks about how a father should never fail to take responsibility for his children. You'll find more on that on the blog, and I'll leave a link for that in the episode description if you're interested. And also, if you're wondering if King Bharata is where the other name for India, that is Bharata, comes from, it's complicated. Scholars believe the word Bharata actually comes from a clan, the Bharatas clan. It is mentioned in Rig Veda, which is a older text than the Mahabharata. In short, the Rig Veda talks about the Battle of the 10 Kings, which was fought in the Punjab region, and the Bharatas, led by King Sudas, win the battle, and under them, several tribes unite and eventually form the Kuru clan, which is believed to be the first such state in Indian history. There is a wonderful video about this battle by Bori or Bhandarkar Oriental Research Institute, and it's a really good video, and if you enjoy this sort of thing, I highly recommend. I'll leave a link to that also in the show notes. Another thing is, the word Mahabharata also means the great epic of the people belonging to the Bharata clan. So this is kind of where it all started. I find it interesting that the issue of women's rights and role was covered in such an important story in an epic. So what do you think about it? That is all I have for you today. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you next time. Dhanyavada.